So hello again, and well, this is the second edition, let's say, of our Fireside Chat. The first one was about the backend, about the microservices. We were discussing more topics related to the backend, and now we have decided to create the front-end version. So a little bit of history. Some time ago, I think half a year ago, we have created as the software house hi from Colombia. That's pretty far. We have created this kind of report about the microservices in the backend, and it was a huge success. So we have decided to create the same for the front-end development and see how you guys will react. So we have created, we have asked lots of developers and CTOs all around the globe to fill in our survey about the front-end developers, the front-end development, and what's the status right now. We had like more than 4,000 answers. And what this webinar is about is to discuss this report and see where we are with this topic. I have invited 3 wonderful guests to join me to this discussion. We have Luca Mezzalira, Vice President of Architecture in DAZN. Luca, a couple of words about you.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you for the second invitation. Actually, we are in this journey together, apparently, with this Fireside Chat. Again, hi everyone. I'm Luca from London, and I'm Vice President of Architecture at DAZN, a Google developer expert on web technologies, and I'm running the London JavaScript community.
Yeah, nice to have you here. It's always a pleasure. And we have Antony Jones, CTO of Beyonk.
Hi there. Yeah, that's right. Pronunciation is correct. So, yeah, so I'm the CTO of Beyonk, which is a SaaS and booking and ticketing platform. So essentially, I'm also a Svelte core maintainer. So I've got a slight bias, maybe. And I do the Svelte Radio Weekly podcast if you want to hear more of my annoying voice. And I'm Antony on Twitter. And thank you, Marek, for the introduction and the invite to this, in fact.
Yeah, thank you for taking the invitation. Nice equipment.
Which is a wonderful site.
Yeah, and we have Andrzej Wysoczański, front-end team leader from the software house. Hi, Andrzej.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Marek, for the invitation. So I'm a front-end tech leader in our company DSH. For every day, I'm working as a developer also. So I'm with JavaScript every day and trying to make our work more fun for our developers. Thank you.
Nice to have you here. And I'm Marek Gajda. I'm the CTO of the software house, where we create reports like State of Frontend. But we also build custom web solutions based on JavaScript and PHP. And talking about JavaScript. So let's dive into the discussion. I have chosen a couple of most interesting results of our survey, and would like to discuss it with you. So the first one, let's maybe generally now talk about the tech stack that is the most popular right now. What's being used around the globe. So the first most interesting question is which of front-end frameworks you are using right now, right? And there are 2 questions about it. The first one, was what you were using during the last year. And the second is a little bit trying to predict the future, which is very, very hard in front-end development. But the second question is about what you are willing to use in the future, or what you want to learn in the future. So basically, this can give us a little bit of insight how it might go, right? The biggest surprise for me, because I knew that the React is probably the leader right now, but I wasn't aware that actually Angular and Vue combined together are not even as popular as the React itself. And is React really the king right now? And will it continue? Will it eat the whole market? How do you feel about it, Antony?
So I mean, again, I have a slight bias, of course. I can understand why React's the sort of biggest. It's definitely had a massive marketing push. I think that probably it is the king in terms of, you know, people want to use something that look good in their CV. They want something with a good ecosystem around it. They want something that's kind of pretty widely known. They'll skill up in something that's useful. I don't necessarily think a king should be something that's, you know, React or Vue or Svelte or Ember or Angular. You can see that Angular is already big because it's been around probably for the longest. People are using it more, maybe even against their will. I think all frameworks have advantages, disadvantages, but what I think is the king probably is something to do with compilers. I think that a compiled front end is far more important in the particular way that the framework, you know, which is the most popular. I do believe the movement will be towards compiled frameworks because you're getting the advantage of not having that runtime overhead in the browser. So for me, sure. I mean, React definitely looks like the king, and that's understandable. It will probably remain so, but it's not necessarily testament to the way it works or the API it has or the user base it has. I think probably the final thing on this really is if you look at React in terms of usability, it's like the Bitcoin of front-end technologies. It was the first. It broke some real boundaries. It really made us think about front-end in a different way. But as with Bitcoin, it has some pretty severe drawbacks. And I think that other frameworks will spring up, like Vue, for example, and address those particular drawbacks. And then it will be kind of playing catch up. So yeah, undefinitive, but what can you say?
Yeah. Speaking about, we'll get back to the discussion about the compiled frameworks, as you called it, in a minute, probably, because this is also a very interesting thing. But speaking about Angular, if you look at the future, how I call this the second answer, actually Angular is going down from the second place to even out of the big three, let's say. This is of course just the prediction, right? But it seems like Vue is climbing up, and Angular is actually going down. What do you think about it, Andrzej?
Okay, so in my opinion, as a daily developer also, React have something like, okay, we go with shot, we change something in a couple times. So we add the hooks, we add the context. Now they are working about some suspense, other things. And Angular, in my opinion, really stuck on the version 2. Yeah, there were some many changes.
Because they still call it. I still hear people call it Angular 2. And now what's the current version? 8?
Oh, I think 8 or maybe 9 for now.
But people still keep calling it Angular 2+. Oh, 10.
Yeah, because
Okay.
it was the biggest change, right? They changed everything there. The way they start using this framework. And why it's not so popular? Maybe it is popular, but it is a big framework. You got there everything, in my opinion. And sometimes you don't need this type of things that you have provided by framework. This is a big tool. Yeah, and React or Vue or Svelte is, in my opinion, a lighter library, not framework. This is a library, I think. If you don't adding there everything, yeah, I know. It is framework or compiler. So this is the way, and you need to know a lot of things more to start working in Angular. And basically Vue is more popular because you don't need to get everything. You can start writing, HTML, some JavaScript. Okay, we can start doing some Vue, we can start doing some React things. And in Angular, you must know TypeScript, RxJS is good to know, and other things. So I think this is the way where it comes. So it's hard to start working in it. And we have a lot of new front-end developers every year. And if they need to decide to work in React or decide to work in Angular, they obviously took React. So this is my opinion.
Yep. And Luca, what's your opinion? How do you react on React?
That's a good one. So I think the emphasis for me is Angular. I think is losing a bit of traction because if you think about that, the JavaScript community is famous for, let's say, releasing multiple innovations every day, and new libraries and new architecture and so on and so forth. Angular is providing an opinionated way to build your web application that are, in my opinion, great for enterprise applications where you need a standard way to be productive immediately. But many, if you think about how many websites we are building with the Jamstack or with, let's say, with simple websites that they don't need to have RxJS and all the other things that we mentioned, at the end, they overcome dramatically the numbers of enterprise application that you build on JavaScript. Therefore, I think it's a fairly natural for also the number of people that are working on enterprise applications. React, Svelte, and any other framework or libraries are pretty interesting because provide the flexibility that maybe you and also you can create your own opinionated architecture and pick your state management library or other stuff that you couldn't do with Angular. I think overall, just to echoing the Antony's thought, I would say that in the future, what I would expect is that the virtual DOM, I think, per se was a great innovation that was brought up by React and then used also by others framework and libraries. However, I think string literal in the future will overcome this paradigm, because at the end of the day, if you think about that, you have an object in memory that you need to traverse every time, and despite anything, you need to traverse a tree, and it doesn't matter how optimized is your algorithm, you have in memory that thing. And yes, in a quad-core MacBook Pro, probably you don't have any problem. But if you go on low-end devices, maybe some challenges are there. So probably string literal and libraries like Svelte or Lit HTML and so on and so forth will gain more traction. Also, Preact-X, for instance, is moving towards that paradigm compared to the previous version of Preact. And that for me is already an indicator that there will be some changes in the future.
Yeah, also virtual DOM is what I call a marketer's nightmare, because it usually happens that they come to me and say, can you just paste this little script? And I say, well, yes, but actually no, right? And there is always this problem that you cannot just so easily, just paste any kind of script or any kind of tags there. There are always this kind of conflicts inside. Okay, but speaking about the Jamstack, you already mentioned, and we also asked about the static site generators, but this is of course a little bit different than the Jamstack. But maybe that's the good question, Antony. How do you feel is really the difference between the precompiled framework, static site generator, and the Jamstack? What's really the difference, and they're used for different things? How do you see that?
So I guess for me, the Jamstack's an interesting innovation, but I think that right now we are not able to build everything we want to do with the Jamstack. It's very focused around basically static generation of assets. So for me, I have this vision that I know actually Microsoft have the same vision, which is basically that applications that are native to iPhones and Android will move towards becoming PWAs. And obviously PWAs, the way that they're going to work, or the way that they can work, is by using lots of APIs and dynamism in the browser. And Jamstack moves away from that. So there's going to be the whole thing's going to move sideways, but I don't think it's going to take over, if you know what I mean. So definitely Jamstack's a good thing, because on a mobile device with low signal in a country where the signals, where the internet's not as good, it's brilliant to be able to load things faster. But what I would say is that it's very heavily based around generating a static site. And for instance, Gatsby, for all it does making static sites, is actually quite difficult. It's actually quite a large framework, and it's actually quite a heavy payload, even though it is doing, basically generating a static site. So you might think, well, is it really that my site needs to become static? Or is it the architecture of my site is wrong and it could be better expressed as a dynamic site, but in sort of using lighter technology, using smaller dependencies, using less JavaScript, for example. I think I would love to make everything static, but for me, one of the big problems that I'm going to have is, for instance, map searching. I could generate pages for every single map coordinate in the world, but that would be extremely heavy. Generation would take forever and ever and ever. There's also the problem with authentication. So I think Jamstack is a fantastic thing to move towards, but you really have to consider, are you actually going to gain advantage from making your site a Jamstack site?
Yeah, and how does it compare to the compilers, which is mentioned, like for example, Svelte?
I don't think they're mutually exclusive. So Svelte is very geared towards making static sites because it generally has a smaller JS payload than the rest of the sites. Your phone, if you're loading a Svelte page versus an uncompiled frameworks page, you're going to do a lot less processing in the browser, because you're getting raw JavaScript, not you're interpreting it to a framework and then interpreting that to JavaScript. But I think that, I guess, Svelte is very geared towards it, and there's a project called Elder.js, which I should mention actually, that has kind of payloads down to maybe 2 kilobytes of JavaScript for a full huge page. I think Svelte is better placed to make these Jamstack generated sites than other frameworks are, but it's not really been proven. It's quite a new thing, and Svelte is quite a new framework, so who knows?
Yeah. Okay. And Andrzej, what do you think about the Svelte? I will not ask Antony about it because, as he said, he might be biased a little bit. But I know, Andrzej, that you have played a little bit with Svelte. From our survey, we have like almost 12% of the market is using Svelte right now, but there are lots of people willing to learn that. And what's your opinion on that? Is it like a hype, or will it stay with us?
Oh, this is a really big predictions. I personally, I don't use Svelte. Sorry, Antony. I did some to-do list or something like this to check this framework. But maybe yes, maybe user will start using this hyped frameworks, because this is yeah. In my opinion, this is a hype because it's a really don't long stay with us always. We had a demo or something like this, and I didn't heard about demo in a couple of weeks. But Svelte is still on hype, and hopefully it will stay with us because it's really good framework or compiler, and this is always a new player, new way to do some applications in JavaScript. So this is a really prediction. I can't tell you, is it go on the wave or just fall down?
And Luca, what's your opinion?
I would say that personally, I always thought that frameworks and libraries are just tools for expressing an intent. And I think also it depends a lot from how the community will embrace a framework and how they're going to work and create an ecosystem around that. It's going to get traction in the next 10 years. It's very, very difficult to say. Probably, yes, it will have an interesting journey as many other frameworks that are out there. But again, we need to understand what we need to solve before picking a framework. I really believe that we need to pick the right tool for the right job. Too often, I would say I've seen in my career front-end developers working always with the same framework because it's the one that they know. But without, yes, potentially you can build with the React or Svelte an enterprise application like you can do with Angular or stuff like that. But you need to understand what are the pros and cons. And that for me is overcoming by far the decision of, I pick this over another one, that often became more, let's say, religious battles than real technical decisions. So I prefer, from my point of view, focusing on what I need to solve. So for instance, Antony was suggesting, with Svelte, I can have like a very low payload and not many JavaScript going around. Absolutely, if that is your intent and you need to optimize for that, go for it. But if many times maybe you have a B2B application where you don't care about that, you care about other things, you need speed of development or developer experience, stuff like that, and you need to pick something else. So more than focusing too much, in my opinion, to the technology by itself, I prefer focusing on the benefits and pros and cons that every technology could bring on the table, and then trying to pair with the project I need to build.
And speaking about the religious battles, let's talk about Redux. and or maybe about choosing the right tool for a right task, right? Because from our survey, what surprised me is that this is a question about the state management, and already Redux is on the second place, which was quite surprising because for a long time it was almost considered for some people as one framework, React plus Redux, making this kind of perfect couple. And suddenly people started, there was this huge, even I would say, hate wave over the internet that the Redux is dead. There were some battles about the discussions. And what's your opinion about it? What's the future of Redux? Is it dead, or what actually happened, Antony?
So I'm kind of glad you asked this question, actually, because a little background, I'm a full stack developer who found Angular the most usable front-end framework when I started building applications kind of by myself. I built an application in Angular. it got quite big, I thought this is actually quite complicated, really, and React and other things were on the scene at that point. So I started learning React, and I think React, it seemed pretty reasonable at times. It was a long time ago. The thing that put me off React, I think, was Redux, actually. I found Redux very complicated for what it was doing. I found the concept of reducers and things, it really kind of drove me away, thinking, why is this so complicated? I came across Svelte about the same time, Svelte version 1, which is, quite a few generations ago, quite a different thing than it is now. But one of the things that really attracted me was the use of stores versus React. So I'd hated React's Redux so much, in fact, that I started using a library called Freezer, which is essentially a single immutable state tree. Everything goes one way. You want unidirectional data. You're just modifying a tree and it only updates the things that are important to it. And stores are basically the same sort of thing. They're probably even more simple than that. So I think for me, if we talk about why what the future stores is interesting that people are still obsessed with kind of React and Redux. I think it's too complicated for what it does. I think there's room there for something quite disruptive to come in and change the way things work. And I think one of the reasons Redux exists is because of the virtual DOM. And if that wasn't there, maybe we wouldn't need Redux at all. But that's controversial.
Yeah, that's great to have some controversy going on, right?
Bring it.
We have answered a little bit of question we had in the chat. The Mark Volkman asked to compare Redux to Svelte stores. You already did that, or you want to add something to that?
I mean, I sort of try to express it the best way I can. I'm by no means a Redux expert, having not used it that much. I would say that I can explain a Svelte store. It's essentially a set of data that you can subscribe to. When it changes, you react to it automatically. It's basically as simple as that. You end up doing a lot of the management yourself. So you end up, say, if a variable changes, then you have to sort of merge the rest of the contents into it, like a reducer, I guess. But it's just vastly simplified. There's only three methods in the API.
Yep. And going back to Redux, Andrzej, what's your opinion on Redux versus React Context API?
Okay. So basically, the Context API, it wasn't built as a state management, right? It was to preventing getting props from component down, and to have props in a child of their parents. That was the Context API things to do. And Redux is our state management. When we have more organized this data, we can do maybe some more centralized. We have more centralized place to manage this data. And if you work with Redux for a couple months or years, you love it. But at the beginning, you hate it. This is normal thing in Redux, in my opinion. But there's no problem to use Context API and Redux together. Yeah, we can start our project by using only a Context API, and if we need to manage the store, we have a lot of data that we need to change from different places, and we have a state that we need to share between a lot of components, like, I don't know, maybe user component and I don't know, some charts and other things, and they are using the same data. It is good to have the store, and as I said, you can start the project with Context API without Redux. You can implement the Redux when you need it, right? This is not a blocking thing or something like this. This is a different conception for the managing state and props, but they can work together. So in my opinion, Redux will stay with us a long time, I think. Or maybe the context API will change in the future and be more centralized for the managing the state of application.
Yeah. There is also this nice article from Mark Erickson, who is the maintainer of the Redux.
Yeah.
Paste you that on the chat if anybody wants to read this article about Redux. Not that yet. Actually, too long didn't read. Is Redux dead? No.
Yeah.
That's the long story short, but generally, he says that if you are using Redux only to just pass these props down the tree deep into the components, that you are just using it wrongly from the first place. And actually, it's good that you have switched to context API or something different. And Luca, do you have any opinion on Redux?
Oh yeah, many actually. I think Redux is not having the popularity that it has before. Because if I remember well, in 2018, Dan Abramov was one of the key maintainer of Redux, took a step back and both inside the evolution of React and what we have right now, where React is becoming de facto more a framework on how they are implementing that and less a library for managing views. I'm not a huge fan of these overlapping of duties and responsibilities. I'm more for trying to keep separated the rendering phase from the data store and the actions that are happening, or the controllers back in the days, because they have the white beard, that we were used to deal with in the past. Personally, I'm a big fan of Mobx State Tree, because has a key difference from Redux, the fact that you can compose trees. So you can, and that means also you can dispose a tree or instantiate a tree when it's needed. And you can compose it. So potentially you can do powerful thing like you have a tree that is available for multiple other trees, and you just decorate other trees, compose other trees with a global, let's call it global one. Also, I hate the name, the term is global, but it's the only one that came out in my mind. And the other nice thing is fully reactive. So as Antony was saying, I change some data and that is propagated. I can have computed properties, or I can update the UI accordingly, and it's taking care of managing the React view and performing only the operation that are needed in order to update a specific node inside the DOM. And those for me are very powerful concept. And then the reactivity part for me is key, because basically simplifying dramatically the development of state management. You can have also on Redux, there are libraries for extending Redux on that, but it's not coming out of the box as far as I know.
Yeah, thank you for that. Okay, so maybe let's move to another topic, which is also, I'm wondering if this is controversial or this is not controversial. So let's talk about the TypeScript. Do you think this is TypeScript is controversial or it's not controversial? Anyone? It is, or?
So why do you think it's controversial?
Yeah, so probably it's not. I'm also wondering if people on the chat can say anything about it. If they, for example, feel that that they are against the TypeScript, because all the people I am talking with, they are into TypeScript, let's say. So I really want to maybe know somebody's opinion that hates TypeScript or says that it's a bad direction or something like that. Our survey shows that almost 80% of the people are using TypeScript right now. They find it better than the normal JavaScript. Let's say it, and the prediction of the future is that 30% think that it will actually just be a new JavaScript, that it will just be the new standard of JavaScript, TypeScript, and some of them will just say that it will be maybe something else, but it will be very popular. And what's your opinion on that? Do you like TypeScript? Is it like a necessity right now? Is it always good to have it, Antony?
So TypeScript, I don't personally use it. However, I have to say that since adding it to Svelte, it has increased probably the active user base by half. I come from a background of typed languages. So for instance, Java. I know that TypeScript typing is even more sort of strict than Java, which is probably a good thing. I like the concept of it, but I think, like Luca says, with most things, you should really think about whether you need it or not. I don't think it's necessary everywhere. I think it can, especially if you're not used to it, hinder development. And if you're trying to hire JavaScript developers, I would say that all TypeScript developers know JavaScript, not necessarily all JavaScript developers know TypeScript. So therefore, you're potentially reducing your employable user base, I guess. I think it's a really good thing. It's definitely great. I don't like it when people say that it's a replacement for tests, or it's in some way stops you having to test. It's certainly useful, and it beats documentation by a long way. But yeah, I think it is a very hyped thing and somewhat deserved, but maybe people should consider whether they really need to sort of have it or not.
Yep. And what's your opinion, Andrzej? Do we need TypeScript?
Yes.
Thank you.
Who's controversial, him or me?
No, for sure. It's easier to work on everyday projects with TypeScript because we have our tools for this, our web storms, our Visual Studio codes, giving us handy information about our props, our cons. So this is a very good thing for developers to do projects. But sometimes in small projects, I know there's no small projects in our world. Every small project will be a big project. But yeah, okay, we don't need to mandatorily use TypeScript. I don't use TypeScript in all projects, so it's good to have, but it's not mandatory. And answering one more question that you asked, or the thing you told, is it if JavaScript will be a new TypeScript in a couple years? Maybe not, because the TypeScript is getting all of the stage 4 or stage 3 things from JavaScript and implementing it before the JavaScript. So they are always one step before the JavaScript. So it will be still running, but this is good, right? We have new things from JavaScript in TypeScript earlier than in JavaScript.
Okay, thank you. I'm keeping track on time, and I have a couple of more questions to ask. So maybe, Luca, I will ask you instead of TypeScript about your favorite topic, which is Micro-Frontends. Luca, by the way, is writing a book, isn't it, about Micro-Frontends? So I am really anticipating having this book in my hands. When is the release?
Next year. So I'm 4 chapters away. So it will be published by O'Reilly. So probably the electronic version of the ebook will be ready earlier next year, but the physical book probably later on.
Oh, yeah. Okay, fingers crossed. And I really need to get one. Okay, but so this other survey actually shows that Micro-Frontends are not so popular at the moment. Well, a quarter of the respondents, maybe it's not so bad. but I was also talking with my developers, and they really didn't know how to answer this question if they are really using micro frontends or not, because they had a couple of apps that they're a couple of frontends. They seem to be small, so this is already a micro frontend. How will you define what actually is a micro frontend?
Yeah, that's a good question. Usually, I tend to define them as a representation of a business subdomain. I'm a big fan of domain-driven design, and I think so far it wasn't really applied to frontend. But in reality, I think there are a lot of things, especially on the initial part of when you start to design an architecture with domain-driven design, where you talk about the ubiquitous language, the domain, the subdomains, and the bounded context. All of these that sometimes is also referred as the DDD light, you can apply on the front end and identifying some areas of the application that are, it could be smaller or larger, it depends how you define this, but they represent a business subdomain. And I'm emphasizing a lot the concept of business subdomain, because then in collaboration with the backend architecture, like with microservices, but it could be also a modular monolith if you think about that, you can really strive to have an end-to-end independence between teams. So the front end and back end infrastructure could be owned by a single team or a couple of teams that would really take decisions in a decentralized way. So far, in my experience, when we work with large projects in JavaScript, the real issue is not happening at the beginning, because they're happening at the beginning, everyone is super pumped up and they want to apply the best practices and all the greatest and latest things that are happening in the community. However, after 2 years of maintenance, you risk that you lose sight, and maybe few people come along, other people leave the company, and many decisions remain as they were 2 years ago. But in the meanwhile, the business evolves, and we cannot avoid to take in consideration this. And Micro-Frontends basically, in my opinion, allows you not only to see a project from a business point of view, but evolving alongside a business. So if you have a specific area that evolves and became more important for the business, then with Micro-Frontends, you can evolve them. You can evolve that area independently and without too much stress to say to the business, I need to rewrite from scratch everything, because it's not going to happen. It allows also a couple of other interesting things, like we introduced in the company I'm working for, canary releases. We introduced the possibility to release independently, having similar build pipelines and automation pipelines, but with different tools that are running because they are following certain guardrails defined by the tech leadership. So in general, allows us a level of flexibility that we didn't have before in the front end world. Obviously, is adding also some drawback, because in order to maintain this flexibility, there is an constant investment on automation. There is a constant investment on reviewing where you're heading, if it's the time for duplicating code or if it's the time to centralizing and abstracting code. So all those kind of things are the day-to-day. So there are situations where they create more complexity, but that's also the reason why I don't suggest Micro-Frontends for every project, but I would suggest Micro-Frontends in a situation where you need to scale your organization, you have multiple teams that are contributing on the same code base, and you want to create this independence that won't slow down the development of a feature.
Yeah, thank you. I hope this cleared out a little bit this topic for people. Please let me know on the chat if you have more questions about the micro frontends. We might be able to ask them at the end. And please let me also know if you have any micro frontends in use right now. Okay, and for the last question, or maybe last point of the discussion, I would like to maybe ask a little bit about a philosophical topic about what is actually a front-end development and what is its role. So starting with maybe a very general survey answer which looks like that. Have you worked as a part of development team during the last year? So almost everybody says that they have been working with a team. That's great. That means that we are not like a lone island, but this is actually working with a team. But what I always keep saying is that what roles in the software development do we actually have right now? When I was starting my adventure with the development as a developer at the beginning, I was just a software developer. That meant that I was doing both front and back end, and I was also doing some things in Photoshop. I was also configuring the SSL for the production server. I was doing everything. But then after some time, it happened that there was this kind of specialization that there are front-end developers and the back-end developers, right? But now what I see is that actually the backend is already divided into this kind of backend, meaning the databases and the business logic, backend for frontend, right? So like the people providing the APIs, and the frontend guys are actually already a backend of frontend and the frontend of frontend, right? And the last one is a little guess that if you would like to put also the DevOps and the design into this picture, this means that on the one side we have the people that are more connected with the design, and the other people may be connected more with the infrastructure and the DevOps world. And the front end, what we are discussing right now, is here at the bottom. I mentioned that this is there are two kinds of front-end developers right now. There's this JS developer and there's this UX developer. And what do you think about it? Is it how it looks? This will be like a new job position in some time. Antony, what do you think about it?
So this is definitely a trick question, right? This is a trick question. Essentially, when I started development, quite different to how when you started, I was definitely a back-end developer. I would never touch the front end. It was a thing that existed that I knew nothing about. And as I went through my career, the notion of full stack developers sort of started to appear. And I definitely, it gelled better with me because I like doing things on my own. I like building my own projects. I like working in startups. And if you're going to work in a startup that can't afford to hire all these different roles, you need to have what I would call generalizing specialists. It's a kind of hybrid because a generalizing specialist is probably somebody who's across everything, but they have a better knowledge, they have a little knowledge of certain parts of the system. Say a back-end developer has some knowledge of front-end, enough to do a few small features or to help out or to pair program or something like that, and vice versa. And I think that that's really valuable to have those full stack developers and not have this massive line between, because it avoids something that I call throwing it over the wall culture, which is essentially, this is what I do, this is my job, and I don't care about how it's deployed, I don't care about how the users use it, I just care about what the API looks like. It's not workable, I think, in any size of company. And it goes on to what Luca was saying about having teams around a specific slice of the system, around a specific micro-Frontend, like a micro application. Giving that team autonomy, unless you've got loads of people, you can't afford to have a dedicated specialist for each of those things on that team. So I think I do believe there is a segregation in the world between front and back end and DevOps and every other role, database ops designer. I think the more everyone knows about everything, the better your team's going to be. It's more cohesive it's going to be, and the better the product you produce at the end of it's going to be.
Yep. And Andrzej, what's your opinion on that?
Okay, so I agree with you, with Antony. This is the best way if we have guys that can do everything, a little bit of backend and do a front end, do a backend and a little bit of front end. This is the perfect way. But sometimes we have a guy that can do a lot of backend, a lot of JavaScript, but he don't like doing styling. So if he see CSSs, he's yeah. So this is the way I think where we are going. So we have a lot of front-end developers that love Node.js. They are love to do JavaScript and logic on the front end part, but they don't feel the view of application. They don't feel good in making this styling, this doing these layouts or other things. They don't like to do fancy things, just logic, just business and other things. And in the other way, we have a lot of guys that love to do animations, charts, and everything, but they don't really like doing this whole JavaScript things, like a logic things. I'm not talking about the JavaScript for animations, for example, and all JavaScript for views, but they don't. It's not fun for them to getting data from database and managing this data. So some other guy can do this, right? So this is, in my opinion, the way where we are going, and how this will look in a couple of years, I don't know. Maybe really there will be a UX developer and JavaScript developer, because you can now get a material design or Bootstrap or something like this. Hey, guy, do it for me. Get these boxes, put it there, and get the data for me, right? We have a lot of applications like this. But in the other hand, we have a lot of applications that are really, really nice and eye-catching. So this is the problem. That maybe not the problem, but the way where we are going.
Okay, thank you. And Luca, what's
Yeah, so I have a mental model for this, and it depends really by the context. I truly believe that the context drive the type of developers you are acquiring or employed. For instance, in DAZN, that is a fairly large organization, I would say, because we have roughly 400 techies, something more than 400 techies in DAZN. We already have the UX designer. So we have a JavaScript developer who's working with the UX team for prototyping, working for the design system and other stuff. Then we have the JavaScript developers that is working on Node.js, and we have the JavaScript developer is working therefore microservices or Lambda functions and so on. Then we have the JavaScript developers working on the front end. We have the JavaScript developer working on the TV front end that is a completely different beast. So there is already a fragmentation, but that is due to the context. Obviously, as Antony was suggesting, if you're working in a startup, that is not required and probably is not even needed. Because if you go to a startup expecting that you would do just your bit in very vertical, it's very unlikely that you're not going to do that. So I believe that for me, it really depends from the size of the organization, and then you already expect that there is a certain structure in place, and the type of let's say technologies and experiences that the developer would like to be exposed. For us, our front-end developers can also pick up stuff related on the automation strategy. In that case, you will be exposed to Docker, and in our case, we're using Drone.io and Node.js and the shell script and stuff like that. So again, I think is company and size of the organization that drive these organization. If you are a freelance, you can be a successful freelance that maybe you have a T-shape, very with a broad knowledge of different technologies and application. But in reality, probably you would be better paid if you have a T-shape with a very vertical, let's say, expertise on a specific thing, because people will recognize you for that and they will join. So again, I think this is already happening. There is already a distinction on that, but it depends context by context, and not, especially in Europe, I would say, we are not lucky enough to see context where these vertical experience, like it could happen in a company like Netflix or Google and so on, can really be exposed to much, because that's the size of the companies, especially in Europe, are not that huge.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And yeah, we also have this kind of, it's always mixed. Like we had this discussion recently, who should actually do the Next.js? Because Next.js is partially a node thing, like a backend thing, but actually front-end developers are better on Next.js than actually with the backend guys, right? And so it's always this kind of mix, and I'm not sure if they can really be in their safe place that this is what I do, and I am not doing anything else, right? Usually the development is also about sometimes going out of your comfort zone and also doing some other parts of the things. That's at least my opinion. Okay, we have 5 minutes, so maybe we should go to some questions from the audience. I have one from Subu. Do web components bring in change to the popularity of front-end frameworks? Google seems to be pushing a lot on that side, isn't it? Somebody wants to answer that? No.
I can give my opinion. I think web components are pretty interesting because are providing a standard way to create, for instance, a design system or share libraries of concrete components in different frameworks. So if you have, for instance, a situation where you are dealing with let's say you are strangling an old application that was written in, I don't know, Angular, and then you're moving to Vue or React, and you want to have a common way to evolve your design system, you can port your design system on web components and use on both frameworks, and that will work nicely. And that is a nice use case. They are also used heavily on creating Micro-Frontends because they provide an encapsulation that usually you don't have out of the box with other systems nowadays. Is evolving that ecosystem, but again, it is a nice way. Obviously, they bring also some drawbacks. So if you think about if your website or your application has to be SEO heavy, and therefore and crawlers has to index your content, if you use a lot of Shadow DOM in the web components, your content won't be indexed, and that is another problem. So I think you need to understand the pros and cons, but in a situation where you want to think a little bit further and you want to have some concrete components that could be shared with the current stack and maybe the future stack, using web components, in my opinion, and obviously you need to be compliant with the web browser that are compatible with, because obviously, yes, there you have polyfills, but polyfills, if you don't apply them correctly, that could increase the payload of the entire application. That, you know, it's not great, especially if we think of the mobile first paradigm, but that could be a good alternative for then be bulletproof for the future.
I think I want to just reply to Luca's comment there with the same sort of, I agree completely, but I would use Svelte in that place. Something with no runtime can play the same role as a web component, essentially. That's kind of one of the reasons I like it. I think they're a very good idea. I think the implementation right now is a little bit all over the place. But yeah, it's the whole concept to be able to port easily between one thing and another is a really nice usage for compiled frameworks, for web components, something to fill that gap.
Yeah, just to add on top of that, we also have this question about which of those solutions or trend will be pretty much dead in 3 years from now. And web components are on the 3rd place. It's like 22% of the respondents say that the web components will be dead in 3 years. That's of course just the results of this.
Yeah, but the Redux is on the 1st place.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Okay, so it's 6 p.m., but we have a couple of more questions. So I would suggest maybe we can stay a little bit longer and answer some of them. So Rafael says, I will maybe just read it, just to not mix it. In the B2B application, especially in the financial services, sometimes we continue to adopt the DXP platform, in the past called Portal as Liferay, as ROI, versus adopting new front-end frameworks. What do you think about the drivers that should be used to identify the right decision? especially in the context where microservices maturity did not start yet.
There was some about microservices, so I think Luca knows everything about it.
I don't know everything. I would love to, but what I can tell you is, I think especially in certain ecosystems, so we are talking about financial applications here, you really need to, those are, in my experience, at least here in London, I know many developers that are sticking with all the technology stacks, and you cannot do much more than that, because the reality of the things is, the investment for porting something to a new technology stack, it would be monumental. So I think that is a classic example where I see Micro-Frontends that could help, because maybe you can start slowly but steady, iterate on small chunk of incremental value that you can generate for your users, and slowly but steady, you start to replace bit by bit. But for the company, you are creating value, because you are creating value for your users. And that is where I see this paradigm of Micro-Frontends shining a lot. And that also is used for migrating old stack to new stack. That is another problem you have in not only financial application, but ERPs and other solutions where you really need to move from an old stack to a new one. You cannot, nowadays, is very unlikely with the speed that the business expect us to develop and also to release feature, that you can take 9 months in stealth mode developing stuff, and then boom, you go with a big bang release. I think is where I would recommend to take a look on Micro-Frontends, see if there are some valid solution over there, because for me, it's one thing that I learned with time is the whole point is not picking one framework over another one, but is more how we can generate value for our customers or the customers of our customers. There we make the real difference. All the rest, it can be done in one way or another, maybe it would be suboptimal or not, but the reality of the things is that for me, the first thing that I always recommend to all the developers is think how you can generate value. Then you can, based on that, you retrofit your choice on technology stack and everything.
I think also just in terms of drivers, you picked up on a good point there. You can turn microservices into little slices and just convert one part and see how that goes. I think that's really valuable, but also for the business itself, not necessarily just the customers, because the business is going to attract effectively cheaper talent. As the technology gets older, the price for that technology grows up because it's less desirable to develop. So actually, you're probably going to save money because you're able to hire from a bigger pool of developers who want to know and use newer technologies.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, I think we are out of questions, so that's great. Okay, so thank you very much for participating. I have one small announcement that, like we did last time with the microservices, we also have free consultations. You will get the link to the chat probably in a second. You can sign up for some free development front-end consultations if you want to ask some questions to our experts in the software house. You have some hard topic, you can do that. So thanks again, Luca, Andrzej, Antony, for
participating.
Thank you.
Discussion. Thanks to the audience for staying with us, and I think that it will be even more interesting if we'll do the very similar report next year and actually see what have changed, because the change is the interesting thing. And so I hope you will see next year in the State of Frontend 2021. If there will be 2021.
Crossing fingers.
So thank you very much again, and yeah, see you around. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.